Welcome and thank you for coming out to UTPA Graduate School STEM Lecture Series for Spring 2013. My name is Javier Saldaña. I work with the Office of Graduate Studies and I focus on recruitment. We encourage all potential grad students to stop by the office and ask us any questions about UTPA and our graduate studies that we have to offer here. We recognize STEM fields by bringing in top researchers in their respective fields and hope to inspire all of you to study the incredible world of science. Please welcome biology student Edwin Quintero.
Hello, guys. First of all, thanks for coming out today. We're actually really happy that this room got filled up pretty fast. One thing, we would like to thank the graduate school for always bringing such great STEM speakers. So most of you guys, some of you guys might know me. My name is Edwin Quintero. I am the president for the Society for Conservation Biology. And we're actually really excited because we just formed the first chapter here in South Texas. And I was very interesting and very happy when I learned that Dr. Dove, his area of interest is dealing with parasite and fish interactions. So that was very, very awesome. The next thing we wanted to talk to is we really appreciate most of the work that Dr. Dove has done, the Georgia Aquarium, and their work in protecting most of our marine species. So without any further ado, I'd like to present to you the Director of Research and Conservation at the world's largest marine aquarium, and also the co-editor of Deep Sea News, correct, and the avid researcher in whale sharks, Dr. Al Dove.
Well, good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Is the lab mic working? You guys can all hear me good? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay, terrific. Well, it's my pleasure to be in McAllen and at UTPA to address you guys in the STEM lecture series tonight. This is my first visit to Texas. I'm thrilled to be here, and I've had a wonderful couple of days around the campus, meeting different people, different student groups, and I want to give special thanks to the people in the STEM office and also in the graduate school who've been so accommodating, and especially Bobby. Can you wave your hand up there, Bobby, in the back there? Bobby's been my minder for the last couple of days, and she's done a wonderful job taking me around, and thanks also, Edwin, for the terrific introduction. What I'd like to do tonight is to take you to a very interesting place, a very simple place. At its core, I'm talking to you tonight about the place where the air meets the water, or more specifically, where the atmosphere meets the ocean, what scientists would call the epipelagic zone, or the Neuston, but you would probably call it the surface of the ocean. And we're going to talk about animals that live in this place and some of the biology that they get up to. To my mind, the epipelagic zone, the surface of the ocean, is a magical place. It is a place where birds can swim. It's a place where fish can fly. It's even a place where squid can fly. Did you know there was a flying squid? I didn't know there was a flying squid either. It is now on my bucket list of animals. I must see this squid before I die. It is the most amazing idea that squid, independent of flying fish, have come up with the same predator evasion strategy of leaving the surface of the ocean and flying through the air. It's quite amazing. It's a place where some animals choose to span two worlds, like this Portuguese man-of-war. Part of the animal is above the water, part of the animal is below the water. And it's even a place where animals can challenge our perceptions. Here's a snail doing what snails do, right? Cruising along, except this snail actually lives underneath the surface of the ocean, lives its entire life cycle without setting foot on land. You think about snails as a land animal, right? There's a snail that lives in the open ocean by turning the world upside down, and instead of traveling on the surface of the land, travels underneath the surface of the ocean. That's okay. Sometimes a little bit different perspective makes you question what's going on in the world. The open ocean, the epipelagic zone, is a place of great drama. It's a huge expanse of blue nothing, permeated by occasional acts of extreme violence, like you're seeing here. So here's a leopard seal eating a chinstrap penguin. This can only take place in the surface layers of the ocean because both of these animals need to breathe air in order to survive. It is a place of great drama. It's a place inhabited by dragons. This is the blue dragon, nudibranch. It lives its entire life in the surface layers of the ocean. Absolutely exquisite animal. And it's also a place inhabited by giants. And so, like this bride's whale. I have to pause here because everybody always talks about how peaceful whales are. Well, not if you're a herring. I mean, it's kind of a bad scene. This is a bad scene unfolding if you happen to be a herring. But it's giants like this that I want to talk to you about tonight, but not this one. I want to talk to you about this one, the world's largest fish, the whale shark. Rhynchodon typus is its scientific name. It's one of only 3 filter-feeding sharks in the world. It is a shark. We call them whale sharks. They're not whales, they're sharks. There are only 3 filter-feeding whale sharks in the world. The whale shark, the basking shark, and does anyone know the third one? Any of the students that were at lunch today might know this. It's the megamouth shark, a very rare and poorly understood animal. So there are 3 species of sharks that get by, not by using big nasty teeth like jaws, but by filtering tiny plankton from the water, and that's how they survive. As I said, this is the largest of 28,000 species of fish. Gets to be 45, 50, 60 feet long. Nobody actually really knows because we know next to nothing about it, which is an amazing thing for the world's largest fish. You think about that. Here's the largest fish on the planet, and we don't know anything about how big it gets. Here's one in Taiwan. We have 4 at Georgia Aquarium, and they came from Taiwan. And so here we have one from Taiwan, but as I said, we don't know how big they get. Here's one in the Philippines, but we don't know where they mate. Nobody's ever seen it. Here's one in Australia. We don't know where they give birth. Nobody's ever seen that either. They also come from places like Mexico. My major field location is in Yucatan, Mexico. I'm going to talk a lot about the state of Quintana Roo tonight. And then also in more exotic places like Mozambique, Djibouti, and the Seychelles. So we're talking about an animal that lives everywhere in the world between the 2 tropics, between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, and the equatorial band in between. You'll find whale sharks in the open ocean if there's enough food. And yet, widespread as it is, and huge as it is, we really don't know anything about it. So we at the aquarium have been doing a lot to try to help remedy that situation. We've been learning about the animals we have in our own collection, but we've also been taking that knowledge to the field and trying to learn about whale sharks in Mexico in particular, but anywhere where whale sharks occur. There's been a veritable explosion of interest in whale sharks in recent years. This chart comes from a thesis I looked at recently, and it charts the increase in the scientific literature about whale sharks. And you can see, I hope, that from very early on, there was practically no knowledge, no scientific knowledge about whale sharks all the way until the middle of the 20th century. And really only in the last 10 or 15 years has it really taken off. And that increase in research interest in whale sharks reflects 2 things. Whale shark aggregations, I'm going to talk about those tonight. That's where lots of whale sharks get together in the same place at the same time. And also increases in technology that have allowed us to find out what whale sharks are doing when nobody's watching, because you can't follow whale sharks all the time. They live in the open ocean. They dive very deep. We don't know what they do at night. And there are some technological tools that will help us answer those questions. I want to start by talking about whale sharks in the Georgia Aquarium collection and a little bit about the aquarium itself too. We are the youngest aquarium in America. We were established in Thanksgiving 2005 in Atlanta, in the heart of downtown Atlanta. And the geographically inclined among you will know that Atlanta is not a coastal city. So we have problem number 1, no seawater in Atlanta. How are you going to keep whale sharks in the heart of downtown Atlanta? The answer is you use engineering and you use technology to build the largest single aquarium in the world, and you fill it with synthetic seawater. And that's exactly what we've done. The end result is this, the Ocean Voyager exhibit, 6.3 million gallons of artificial seawater in an aquarium that's the size of a football field, so over 300 feet long, 30 feet deep, with one of the largest viewing windows in the world. It's about 65 feet long, 2 feet thick, and the window is made of acrylic, not glass. If this window was made of glass, it would be green and you wouldn't be able to see 5 yards into the tank. So This is only possible because of advances in materials technology that allowed us to build such a large, clear window that still preserves the guest's ability to see into the tank and see the animals that we have. We have about 8,000 animals in this exhibit, including particularly 4 whale sharks and 4 manta rays. And working with those has been a real privilege. And we've been able to give almost 20 million guests so far the immersive experience of seeing whale sharks in person, which otherwise in nature they would be very unlikely to see in your whole life. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Can I see a show of hands of anyone who's actually been to Georgia Aquarium? We've got a few people? All right, so we have a few, and the rest of you have a job to do. Come see the aquarium. I invite you to come and enjoy the whale sharks, enjoy the manta rays. It really is a lovely exhibit, and this particular tank sets us apart from every other aquarium in the world. There's no other aquarium that has a tank quite like this. I mentioned the acrylic that we use in the window, and just to give you guys a peek behind the curtain about what life is like at the aquarium, this is that window during construction, and it was industrial scale manufacturing. We poured the window in 6 sections that were in 2-inch slabs of acrylic, and then those slabs were put in place on a giant scaffold that you can see there, and then they tented the whole thing off so that they could bond those 6 sections together. We didn't see that happen. We don't know how they did it. It was a company secret from the Japanese company that makes the window, but the net result is a 65-foot wide, 30-foot high window with a 300-foot light path that allows people to enjoy the aquarium. The other thing that you need in order to keep these animals is industrial scale water treatment. You've got 6.3 million gallons of water, 8,000 animals doing what animals do when you feed them. It's got to come out the other end at some time. And you have to deal with that, especially in a recirculating system. We don't have the luxury of being able to put new seawater in there, so we have to make our own seawater, and we have to treat the water that we have very carefully, and so we do that with a state-of-the-art filtration system. These are 17 of the 116 pumps that make up the life support system for Ocean Voyager exhibit. We have 34 large protein skimmers, we have 56 giant sand filters, 12 ozone contact towers, and an enormous deaeration tower. Doesn't really matter what those things are. The point is, it is a water treatment plant that is on the same scale as what you might find in the municipal drinking supply of a large city. In fact, we know for a fact that we filter the same amount of water through this plant every day as the municipal drinking supply for the city of Boston. So we're talking about a sizable industrial scale water treatment plant that most of the guests who come and see the whale sharks have no idea is there behind the scenes. That's what it takes. The net result of it all is that we're able to filter the entire volume of the tank every hour. So the entire volume of that football field size aquarium goes through the filtration system every hour. And that allows us to keep the water in tip-top condition and keep the whale sharks happy and keep the water looking good so the guests can enjoy them. There's a lot of technology that's used to control that. So those pumps and so on were the engineering, the E in STEM. This is the T in STEM. This is the technology that we use to manage the whole system. It is computer controlled. We have 75 major exhibits, and they're all run by computer. And when you go past the life support engineering office, you're more likely to see a life support engineer sitting at a computer wearing a polo shirt than you are to see them out in the aquarium wearing greasy overalls and carrying a large wrench. You don't have to do that anymore. You can open and close valves from here. You can turn on and off filters from here. And in fact, they can even do it from a smartphone. So the duty officer carries a BlackBerry that they use to control the life support systems of this aquarium. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how the whale sharks come to be in Atlanta, because that story is kind of cool too, and it's got some STEM elements in it as well. The story starts in Taiwan. That's where our whale sharks came from. And it starts in a pelagic trap fishery off the coast of Wailin in Taiwan, which is about as far away from Atlanta as you can get and still be on the same globe. So we like to set ourselves small challenges, get whale shark from Taiwan to Atlanta and put it in an aquarium. Over in that part of the world, very deep water comes very close to the coast. And so there are pelagic trap fisheries there where fishermen have set up these giant barrier nets that go out from the beach. And as pelagic organisms come up the coast, they run into that barrier net. And because they like to stay in that surface layer of the ocean I'm talking about, instead of going under the net, which they easily could, they try to go around the net. So they swim out towards the ocean side. And when they do that, they get funneled into a trap net and they get caught in a sea pen from which they then cannot escape. That was used as a fishery at a time when there was a quota. They were allowed to eat whale sharks in Taiwan. That quota is now being zeroed out, so it's not legal to catch whale sharks for food in Taiwan or anywhere else for that matter. So what happened was we actually got our whale sharks from the fishery. Had we not transported them to Atlanta and put them in the aquarium, they would have been sent to market and been butchered for food. They call them tofu shark over there because supposedly the flesh has the texture of silken tofu. What we did was leave the animal in the sea pen for a while we arranged the logistics of transporting them to Atlanta, and also because you have to spend some time getting to work with the animal. You can't just take a whale shark out of the ocean, put it in an aquarium, and expect that everything's going to be hunky-dory. The first thing you have to do is get them to be unafraid of you. And that's why there are 2 snorkelers in the sea pen. They're there for what we would call desensitization. They're there to get the animal used to the presence of people. And once you've done that, then you can take the next challenge, which is to get the animal to feed from you. And so we begin to offer them krill and other food sources in the sea pen, and only when they're feeding solidly from us reliably every day do we even entertain the idea of perhaps moving them to Atlanta. That's good, because we need the time to organize the logistics. When you're ready to pull the trigger on that, that's where things get really interesting, because you have to lift the whale shark out of the sea pen and put it in that white box that you see on the boat there, which is called a twan. You race that boat to the harbor, move it to a different box on a truck, take the truck to the airport, put the box from the truck onto a Belfast heavy lift, fly the heavy lift from Hualien to Taipei, move it to a 747, fly the 747 from Taipei to Anchorage, and from Anchorage to Atlanta, take it off the truck in Atlanta, put it on another truck, and take it through the downtown Atlanta traffic and with a police escort, and then move it into its new home. So this is what it looks like. We lift the whale shark with water. These animals, because they're sharks, they don't have bony skeletons, they have cartilage skeletons. And that means that they're not designed to support their own weight out of water. That means you cannot lift them out of the water. They'll go and squish out because their body isn't rigid enough to hold them out of water. So we lift them with water at all times. And so that's what's happening here. We're moving them into their transport container. And here we see 2 transport containers sitting over the wings of a 747 provided by UPS. UPS did this for us as a sponsorship, and I'm really glad they did, because I'm pretty sure we couldn't afford the fuel bill if we tried to do it ourselves. I wish I had time to tell you about these 2 boxes, because they're amazing pieces of engineering in and of themselves. The very basics, it's a box with water in it with a whale shark, but there's a lot more to it than that. They have the ability to scrub CO2, to add oxygen, to correct pH, and all of which is designed so that in the 40 hours it takes to go from water to water, you're able to keep the water quality perfect for that whale shark, so that when it arrives in the aquarium, it can go directly into its new home without any kind of acclimation. Those of you who have home aquariums, you've done those acclimations before, right? You buy a fish at the shop, you bring it home, and you do a little bit of water that you add to the bag over time until the fish is ready to go into the tank. We didn't have to do that, because by the time we got to Atlanta, the water in the tank and the water in these boxes had the same water quality parameters, so we were able to move the animals directly over without shocking them. This is the moment of release. So having got the box to the aquarium, these divers are at the bottom of the exhibit, and they're releasing the whale shark from its stretcher, and the final result that we're all looking for is this: a juvenile whale shark swimming around in the world's largest aquarium. We've done this transport now 3 times. We're getting pretty good at it, and it is nonetheless a remarkable feat of logistics. And it's been a privilege for me to be part of the team that does that, because there's a lot of really talented, creative people, and their ability to pull together on a task like this has been really impressive to me as a scientist. I'm not used to working in big teams like that, and it was really cool to see it. You also get a sense from here about the scale of the exhibit, right? It's very large indeed, and you can see someone there in a boat out floating in the middle of the exhibit. In fact, we use boats quite a lot. That's how we feed the whale sharks. So the first thing you might notice from here, whale shark is a little bit bigger now than it was in the first picture. Our whale shark's 12, 13 feet when they arrived, now closer to 24, 25 feet in length. And they've been at the aquarium for several years. And this is my friend Christy, and she's feeding one of the whale sharks from a boat, which is how we do it. We clip the boat off on these tag lines, pull them up and down the tank, and she uses that ladle to lay out a trail of krill through the water, so that that whale shark can swim through and do its normal feeding behavior that they would do in the ocean. You might also notice that the ladle that Christy's using is red. Each ladle is a different color, and each whale shark is trained to come to a different colored ladle. They can be trained just like dogs. Maybe not just like dogs, they won't hold a treat on their nose, but they will come to the right boat, to the correct ladle, and we're able to track each animal's diet independently. They're not super smart, but They're not as smart as manta rays, for example. We have 4 manta rays as well, and those guys really are very clever. But these guys, perhaps not quite that smart, but they do know when it's chow time, and they do know which boat is their boat to go to. And if you don't feed them quickly enough, they'll nudge the boat too, to just remind you that who's really in charge of this situation. Unfortunately, the first 2 animals that we bought from Taiwan, their names were Ralph and Norton. They died in 2007 after a period of not eating anything that lasted for almost 6 months, and was very disturbing to everybody who worked at the aquarium, and me included at the time. But we determined that when those animals died, we were going to make the most of it, so we collected as many samples as we could. They were really some of the first scientific necropsies that have ever been carried out on whale sharks, and so we collected a whole plethora of samples from those animals, and to this day we're still publishing new science based on samples from these animals. We have a whale shark genome project, for example, which is a collaboration we have with Emory University, and that's based on material from Ralph and Norton. The first whale shark genome will be based on Ralph's spleen, I believe, the first genome map that we put out. But we're able to look at other things too during the necropsy process. This is a cutaway on the filtration apparatus that they have in their mouth, the thing that they use in their gills to separate the food from the water. Nobody had really looked at that scientifically before. How does this thing work? And this is what it looks like. And you may be able to appreciate from the picture that the filtration, I have to orient you a bit. This is the bottom of the mouth, and that would be the top of the mouth. So it's normally oriented, and we're looking over right in the corner of the mouth. So if you can imagine the mouth like that, we're looking in this little triangle in the corner. The filtration surface itself is black. It looks kind of like a steel wool or a Brillo pad that you might use for scouring pots and pans. It's actually pretty rough too. It feels like that. But once you cut into it, you can see that rapidly these little holes start to join together into water canals and water channels, and eventually they get passed out through these veins that direct the water to the outside of the gills. And so this is what they use to separate food from water. If you look a little more closely at that filter surface, this is what it looks like. And when I think about a filter, I think about a solid piece of material with pin-shaped or circular holes in it, right? Like a colander that you would use for separating pasta from water. But that's not what whale shark filter looks like. It's actually this kind of meandering ridge with little branches that come off it, and they define these pore spaces that you can see here. The average pore space is about 1.8 millimeters. I don't want to bore you with tedious facts, but this one is important because most of the food that they eat is significantly smaller than that. Most of the food that they eat is about 0.2 millimeters. How does a filter that's got holes in it that are 1.8 millimeters wide, how does that effectively trap food particles that are a fifth of that size or even a tenth of that size? It was a bit of a mystery to us when we first looked at it. Well, we've solved the problem by looking at it a little harder and collaborating with scientists from the University of South Florida. And the way it goes is like this. I mentioned a colander to you before that you would use to separate macaroni from water. That's what we would call a dead-end filter. You pour the pasta perpendicular to the colander, and the water goes right through, and the pasta gets retained on the screen, right, until the colander is full, and you get to put some marinara sauce on it and go and have dinner. Whale sharks don't work this way. The way a whale shark works is that the water doesn't flow through the filter perpendicular. It flows almost parallel to the filter surface, skimming across the top of the filter. Water gets dragged out through those little holes, those canals and those veins to the outside through surface tension, and the food particles that are suspended have more momentum, and so they carry on to the back of the throat. So what you get is, as you go from the front of the mouth to the back of the mouth, which can be 4 or 5 feet in this case, and an ever more concentrated stream of food until there's a little soft pouch at the back of the throat where there's a spinning ball of plankton that gets bigger and bigger as they push their way through the water until it reaches a threshold size, triggers a swallowing response. They swallow that ball of food and they keep going. It turns out to be an incredibly efficient way of filtering food from water. The other cool thing that you'll notice if you go back a second, you get particles that block the filter in a dead-end filter. That doesn't happen with a cross-flow filter because you're not trapping the particles on the filter. You're just using the filter to concentrate the food. So this filter doesn't clog. It's a really, really efficient system. You guys remember that giant whale I showed at the beginning, inhaling that group of herring? People always talk about how clever whales are, but think about the way they feed. What's he doing there? He's taking a giant gulp of water. That's why they have those ribs on their neck, so they can inhale huge volumes of water. And then they use their tongue to push the water out of their mouth and trap the food on the baleen plates that they have hanging from their top jaw. So if you think about it, they're filtering in reverse. They bring the water in, and then they push it back out forwards in the direction in which they're traveling. Well, whale sharks don't do that. Whale sharks are way more efficient. They've got a filtration system that works continuously. They don't have to batch process one gulp at a time. They can feed continuously, and they just push on through the water, swallow, 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 and they can feed all day like that. And we think it's probably one of their real keys to evolutionary success and why they've been able to survive so long in the tropical oceans, which are not as productive as the higher latitudes. The other thing that we've been able to do at the aquarium is push the boundaries of veterinary medicine. You don't typically take whale sharks to see your local veterinarian, but there are veterinarians who specialize in aquatic animals, and we've been able to do a lot of veterinary work. I'm not a veterinarian myself, but I work in a paraveterinary capacity sometimes. So here's me taking blood from one of our whale sharks. And it turns out something as simple as getting blood from a whale shark is actually really, really difficult. In fact, that's pretty true of just about anything you want to do with a whale shark because they're giant and they don't sit still. Unfortunately, the place that we found to take blood from whale sharks is also not very convenient. It's the base of the tail, which is typically swinging back and forward through a 10-foot arc, and if it hits you, it really hurts. And so trying to take blood and find a place to stick a needle in one of those is a little bit like trying to thread a needle, but you and the thread are in one boat and the needle's in a different boat, and you're in a class 5C bouncing up and down like this. So getting blood is very, very challenging. The needle that I use there is not the needle I'm going to use to take blood. That needle is used to actually auger a hole through their skin, which is incredibly tough. And then I'll use a different needle, actually a 3.5 gauge, sorry, an 18 gauge 3.5-inch spinal needle that we'll use to finally get the blood sample. But based on being able to do that, we were the first people to get blood from whale sharks. We've been able to describe their blood. And we published a paper of descriptive hematology about whale sharks. And for those of you who are interested in blood, this is what their white cells look like. And they're not radically different from other sharks. They're really big. They have really big blood cells, but not because the shark is really big. All of their relatives who live on the bottom and are much smaller, they have really big blood cells too. It's probably a function of their slow metabolism. Okay, enough about whale sharks in the aquarium. And now I want to tell you about whale sharks in Mexico, with my major field location. And so here's where we're talking about. I've got Georgia Aquarium marked up there in Atlanta and UTPA over where we are today. And I'm talking about the Yellow Star area, the northeastern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula in the Mexican state of Quintana Roo. And there are whale sharks there very reliably. It's probably the most reliable place in the world where you can go and see whale sharks. This is the place we're talking about. For those of you who've been to Cancun before, it's just north of Cancun. There's a sort of peninsula island, a place called Isla Holbox. And there's a place there where whale sharks were known to gather off the coast for many years. They come in 20s and 30s and 40s, and they come in inshore waters in summertime, and you see them like this, their top jaw sticking out of the water as they do that behavior of pushing along, filtering food from the water. Maybe you can appreciate from this picture that the water is kind of green and kind of cloudy, turbid. There's a big plankton bloom here, and so they're there to take advantage of this plankton bloom. Mostly they're feeding on this thing, which is a little shrimp called Lucifer faxini. I think that's an awesome scientific name to be called Lucifer. But we would call a suggested shrimp or ghost shrimp. It's a tiny planktonic shrimp that forms big swarms in the Gulf of Mexico in summertime. So just north of Holbox, there are lots of these, and the whale sharks show up to feed on them. In 2006, something different happened. Instead of the whale sharks showing up at Holbox in the green inshore waters to feed on Lucifer, they showed up much further to the east and the south, far offshore from Isla Contoy and Isla Mujeres. And we call this afuera aggregation or outside aggregation, the offshore event. And that's not a green turbid inshore event. That is a clear blue water pelagic event. This is a picture I took in 2010 of a whale shark. He's clearly feeding, but on what? Because the water is crystal clear. Well, people who know plankton will tell you there's only one thing that you can have in high numbers that is completely transparent, and that's fish eggs. And so that's indeed what's happening. We dragged the plankton net through these locations, and we got tons and tons of fish eggs. In fact, that's all we got, lots and lots of fish eggs. What kind of fish were they? I don't know. We weren't able to raise them up. So we took samples and we sent them to the Smithsonian to have their DNA sequenced. And the people at Smithsonian told us that it was this fish, the little tunny or little toonie. Euthynis alliteratus. Down in Mexico, they call them bonito. We would not call them bonito. It's a different species where I come from, at least. But that's the thing about common names. If you want to resolve confusion, use the scientific name. So this is Euthynis alliteratus. You can call it the little tunny if you like. Nobody knew that these were spawning in Yucatan, Mexico. And it must be a serious spawning event, because when I say the whale sharks were gathering at the Afuera, I don't mean 20 animals, 30 animals, 40 animals. I mean hundreds of animals in the same place at the same time. I believe there are 27 in this picture. That boat, the Lily M, she's 34 feet long. And so you can get some principle of how big these animals are. And that's a close-up taken from about 500 feet in the air. Go up a little bit higher to 2,000 feet, and this is what it looks like. One of the things you might be able to appreciate is that there's a diagonal band where the water is a little bit paler than the other water. Can you guys see that from where you're sitting? That's discoloration from the fish eggs. There are so many fish eggs that you can see it from the air. And there are lots and lots and lots of whale sharks. If you're having trouble seeing them, this. And so I took the liberty of marking them for you in red in Photoshop. And I can tell you that there's 173 whale sharks in this picture. The most whale sharks we've ever seen in one place was 421. And that is, by an order of magnitude, the biggest whale shark aggregation known to science. And so, and this was taking place in 2006, 17 miles from one of the biggest tourist destinations in the Caribbean, and nobody had any idea that this was happening. A couple of fishermen said, oh yeah, we see whale sharks out here all the time. But, okay, you could have told us, guys. We would have really liked to know that. But it turns out that there are hundreds and hundreds of whale sharks showing up reliably every summer to feed, always on the same thing, little tiny eggs, and lots and lots and lots of them. The crazy thing about this was we hadn't discovered the whale sharks before. We still haven't discovered the tunny. We still have not found spawning tuna populations, but we know it's happening. It probably happens at night, or maybe in the pre-dawn hours, and these schools of tuna probably coalesce very quickly. There's a giant spawning frenzy, and then they dissipate just as quickly. And so I don't know if we're ever going to find the tuna spawning event. It's very difficult to catch because it's probably really ephemeral event. But it keeps hundreds of whale sharks going for 4 months in the summertime. So we must be talking about the mother of all tuna schools, and we still haven't found that yet. So don't let anybody tell you that there isn't cool stuff yet to be discovered in the oceans. We didn't discover this until 2006, and we still haven't discovered the tuna spawning event that supports this for so long every summertime. So what's going on in this area? Why is northern Quintana Roo so important for whale sharks? Well, a lot of it's got to do with the geography of the area. And so I want to set the scene for you a little bit. So there's Cancun. You can see I've marked it here. What's important to notice is that south of Cancun, the continental shelf is really, really narrow. So you don't have to go very far offshore before it suddenly gets really, really deep. I've marked the whale shark aggregation sites there. There's the two main ones I told you about and another one in between at North Contoy. But I've also marked the shelf break for you, where the sea suddenly gets a lot deeper. And I want you to see that when you go from south of Cancun to north of Cancun, suddenly the continental shelf gets a lot wider very, very quickly. We also have these offshore structures like Arrowsmith Bank, and this is the northern end of Cozumel, for those who've been to Cozumel. And both of those things interact with the current that comes up the coast from Belize. And that's what happens. The current comes up the coast, interacts with these offshore structures, encounters a rapidly widening continental shelf, and then the coast takes a 90-degree turn to the left. And that causes water to spin up from deep water onto the shelf. We call them eddies, and those eddies bring upwelling. They bring nutrients from the deep water up onto the shallow shelf, and they sponsor tremendous productivity in this area just north of Cancun. It's a very, very special place. I've told you about whale sharks, but there's also giant manta ray aggregations. There's 4 species of dolphins. There's 2 species of turtles. It's the northern end of the Mesoamerican Reef. There's tons of sailfish if you go there in the wintertime. And of course, this giant unseen tuna spawning event that we still haven't found, even though it's out there somewhere. It's a really remarkable place and somewhere that needs a lot more conservation protections, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. I did want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about technology as we use it to help us understand whale shark biology. One of the great advances responsible for the really steep part of that publication curve I showed you at the beginning is these things. These are satellite tags, and you can put these on a whale shark to tell you where they go when they leave Yucatan, Mexico, because you can't follow a whale shark all the time. These are 3 different models. The one on the left is wrapped in a solar panel, so it has its own onboard power supply. It has a float so that when it comes off, it can float up to the surface. And that one's designed to record data for a long period of time, then detach itself from the animal and float to the surface and report its information to you via satellite. The 2 on the right are real-time satellite tags. They are essentially a Garmin in a float. They're designed to be deployed on an animal and to tell you where that animal is all the time, in real time, using the GPS satellite system, the exact same one that your TomTom or Garmin or even your phone uses if you use your phone for GPS. These things are fantastic. They record all sorts of great information for us, and we get it back via satellite, and that's really exciting for somebody like me to be able to do that. This is a picture of my hotel room in Mexico, and I am getting ready to go out and deploy a bunch of satellite tags on whale sharks. I took this photo to show that it's a complicated procedure, but mostly to convince my wife that when I go to Mexico, I'm not sitting on the beach drinking cerveza, eating ceviche, and having a good time. I actually have to do real work while I'm there, and it is very hard work. The hardest part of which is getting these things to stay stuck on the whale shark. The whale sharks, one of their biggest defense is that they have the thickest skin in the animal kingdom. It's about 4 inches thick on their back, and it's the consistency of vulcanized rubber. So getting a tag to go into that skin and stay there for 6 months turns out to be very, very difficult. Nonetheless, we persevere and we try to get it done. This is me deploying a satellite tag last summer, September the 19th. You can see I've got a Hawaiian sling spear in my hand, and I've just inserted this tag into the skin of this large female whale shark. Her name is Lucy, and she swam around for 6 months in the Gulf of Mexico, and eventually her tag came off when she was in the Flower Garden Banks, which is a coral reef ecosystem in the northern Gulf of Mexico, offshore from Galveston. The tag floated around for a few weeks, reporting its data like it's programmed to do every day by satellite, and I was able to gather those data and compile them. And then eventually the tag washed up inside Matagorda Island, not far from, I believe the town's called Seadrift, Texas. I don't know, I've never been there, but a very remote piece of shore. We still haven't found the tag. It would be really nice to get it back because we can get more data off the tag than we get via satellite. But the important thing I wanted to tell you was that this is real science, just happened, haven't published this yet. This wonderful animal, Lucy, I look forward to seeing her back in Mexico this summertime. I'd like to put another tag on her and see where she goes next time. But yes, we're still gathering the data from this tag, and hopefully as we unpack the information from the satellite data, we'll be able to tell what she did for 6 months. I don't exactly know yet. We'll find out. Taken together, all of this satellite tagging data tells us a story about what whale sharks do, mostly. We don't know what they do in wintertime, so there's a giant question mark there. But in early spring, they show up in southern Mesoamerica. They show up in Utila in Honduras, and then later into spring, they show up in Belize, and then after that, they move up to Yucatan, Mexico, and they hang out there to gnaw away on tuna eggs for 3 or 4 months before they do a grand loop in the Gulf of Mexico, including coming right past South Padre until they eventually reach the mouth of the Mississippi, down the west coast of Florida, and then we kind of lose them because by then usually the tags have come off, either by program or because we can't get them to stay stuck on long enough. Maybe they go around the western end of Cuba, maybe they go around the eastern end of Cuba, maybe they swim along the Windward Islands and then come back to start the cycle again the next year. We don't really know. But I have to stress that this is kind of a general pattern. It's not like a humpback whale. Those animals have very rigid migrations. They go past the same island on the same day every year as they go from the tropics to the Arctic or Antarctic. This is more like a general pattern, but there are certainly animals that kick the system and don't do what they're supposed to do. Now, the best example I can give you is the female we call Rio Lady. She was tagged in Yucatan, Mexico by some colleagues from Mote Marine Lab, and rather than going into the Gulf of Mexico, she turned right and she went along the Leeward Islands of the Caribbean, jumped across onto the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and swam all the way down to a place called St. Peter and St. Paul Rocks, about 800 miles off the coast of Brazil. And that trip was about 4,500 miles one way to go there. It's one of the longest migrations known for a marine animal. The cool thing about Rio Lady is she showed up in Mexico again the next year, and I've seen her in Mexico every year since then. She's a very distinctive female. She's kind of gnarly, actually. She's got lots of scars, like she's been in the wars. She's had a rough life traveling down there. Why did she go there? Who knows? Well, I've got an idea. The idea is that they go there to give birth, that big females go to these oceanic islands to give birth. I told you at the beginning, nobody's ever seen the process of a whale shark giving birth. But the truth is, all of the animals that we see in these aggregations in coastal Mexico are immature or subadult animals, and they're mostly male, over 2/3 male, and even the females we see are probably immature. You want to see a really big, mature animal, you go to these oceanic islands, places like the Galapagos, St. Peter and St. Paul, Ascension and St. Helena, very remote places, some of the most remote places on Earth. And that's where the big animals are, and they're almost all female, and they're almost all pregnant from the way we can look at them. Nobody's managed to catch them in the act of giving birth yet, but I think when you find a bunch of pregnant females in one place at one time, the data's trying to tell you something, that they're probably there to have babies. How many babies? 300 is the best estimate, a lot more than any other shark species. And the cool thing about whale sharks, if you're a female whale shark, I guess, is that those 300 babies, the one female that's been looked at scientifically for this, she had 300 embryos in her, and they were all different stages. She had everything from fertilized eggs all the way through to baby whale sharks that were just ready to pop, and everything in between, complete continuum of development. And they all had the same genetic dad. How does that work? Is he swimming along beside her? Are they mating over and over again? No, probably not. Probably what happens is that they mate once, and then the female holds on to the sperm for a really long period of time and fertilizes eggs over and over and over again. They're probably almost perpetually pregnant once they reach sexual maturity. And probably, if you're a male whale shark, you probably get one shot at it. And if you mate successfully, good for you, but you're going to spend the rest of your life frustrated because the ladies don't need you after that because they can produce all the babies they need for a long time. One of the other cool bits of technology, this is software technology that I'm going to talk about now. This is really useful. We do spot pattern matching on whale sharks. We do photographic identification. If you want to do photo ID on dolphins, you look at notches and scars on their dorsal fins. You want to do it with humpback whales, you look at barnacles and scars on their tail and on their head. You want to do it with whale sharks, you do it with spots on the side of their body. And so that's what we're doing here. This project is called EcoCotion. It's the Global Whale Shark Database. And so we photograph animals. This particular photo that we're looking for on the left side, just above the pectoral fin, and it turns out that those spots patterns are completely unique, like fingerprints, and they're stable throughout the life of the shark, and you're able to assign individual identities to animals based on their spot patterns. And this has turned out to be really, really useful information in ways that I never anticipated before. One of the cool things about this was that the software was co-opted from the software that they use on the Hubble telescope to recognize stars in starfield photographs that the Hubble telescope takes. It's the exact same software that they use for that is now co-opted to recognize whale sharks based on spot patterns. It's also really cool because it's citizen science. If you go out there and you manage to take a picture of a whale shark while you're on vacation, you can submit that to the database. It'll get added to the database, and you'll get an email if that animal is ever seen anywhere else ever again, which is really cool. Now, having cataloged over 900 animals in this aggregation, you can bet I get a lot of emails from EcoCotion these days about where animals have been seen. But it's really cool because if you haven't seen the animal before, that's cool, new animal. If you have seen the animal before, well, that's great. Now you're building a story about where these animals are going and what they're doing while you're not looking. You can do other things with spot pattern data that I didn't think about. One of the things we've been able to do is try to answer that question, how many whale sharks are there? Very fundamental question. And you can answer it with spot pattern photo ID. You do it by looking at what we call the discovery curve. When you first start looking at whale sharks, every one you see is new. Over time, you start to see animals a second time, maybe a third time, and then eventually you've seen them all, and you've fully censused the whole population. But you don't have to go all the way to that end of the curve, right? You can start the curve, and then you can extrapolate with math. Where is this curve going to flatten off? And we did that, and the estimate we get is that there's about 1,300 animals in the Mexican Caribbean whale shark population. This estimate agrees really well with several other techniques that we've used for estimating population size, so we have a feeling that at least in the Mexican Atlantic, there are probably about 1,300 whale sharks. How many whale sharks in the world population? We have no idea. There is no global population assessment for whale sharks yet, and that makes conserving them and even assessing whether they're endangered or not a very difficult thing to do. One of the other things photo ID allowed us to do was to document healing. We had no idea that whale sharks have phenomenal healing powers. So for those of you who are disturbed by this image of an injured whale shark, I have good news in one slide's time. This is an animal that had a bad encounter with an outboard motor. So an animal has been run over by a boat, and on the leading edge of the dorsal fin, 2 of those prop cuts have gone deep into the flesh. It's hard to get an estimate on size, but I can tell you that right cut is about 6 inches deep. So we're talking about a pretty serious cut. This is animal, it's called MXA281, and this photo was taken in mid-August of 2011. We came back 13 months later, took a photo of MXA281, and look, up in that area where I've circled, which is where the previous photo was, there's no way to know that she was ever injured. We know for a fact that this is the same animal because the spot pattern is identical, confirmed not just by the computer but by visual matching. It's the same animal. In the course of 13 months, she healed to a point where it's practically impossible to tell that she was ever injured in the first place. We've now seen this for several different animals. It appears that whale sharks have phenomenal healing powers, and this is something that we've learned by doing photographic identification. I'd like to turn now a little bit to conservation because STEM is really about science, the process, math, the language, and technology and engineering, which are applications of science and the language. But so is conservation. And one of the things we like to do is turn that biology into better protection for wild populations of animals. And what you're seeing here on this map is the area that I've been talking about, and we're talking about all of those dots that you see there, which is GPS recordings of where different animals are, seen from a plane or seen from a boat. And we provided that information to the Mexican government, and they set up a place called the Whale Shark Biosphere Reserve, which is that red polygon you can see on the map. It's a marine protected area designed specifically to protect whale sharks when they're in this region. This was a little bit embarrassing because no sooner had we done this than the whale sharks moved to that Afuera location that I told you about before, and they haven't been back inside the Whale Shark Biosphere Reserve ever since the thing was set up. So we learned a really important lesson about putting boxes on maps for highly migratory marine species that don't respect international borders, let alone the little red polygon that you put on your map back at the office. So we're now working with the Mexican government to have the whole of Mexico declared a sanctuary for whale sharks. So wherever they go, whether it's in Baja, whether it's in Yucatan, whether it's in Veracruz or Campeche, it doesn't matter. They would be protected wherever they go. This is the other problem with whale shark conservation in Mexico. This is the whale shark Afuera aggregation, the 173 animals. Actually, it was taken the same day as that picture. The animals are over there. But how many whale sharks can you see? Not many. But you know where they are, right? Because there's lots and lots of boats. There are actually 63 boats in this picture, including all of the ones that you can see streaming from Isla Mujeres, racing out to the Afuera. What's happened is that an ecotourism industry has sprung up very rapidly to take advantage of the tourists' willingness to go out, pay $100 to go and swim with whale sharks. The problem is, because it's not inside a protected area, in fact, nobody can agree, seemingly even in the Mexican government, which department is responsible for looking after this event. And all the while we're talking about it and arguing about it, the number of licenses keeps growing because it's hard to say no when you've got no data to back it up. And the number of boats going out there, both legal and illegal, is growing out of control. And so now we've got these crazy days where you go out there and there's an armada of 100 boats out there. Every one of those boats has 10 tourists. They're all guaranteed in their tourists that they're going to see whale sharks. So they all go out there, they disgorge 10 tourists in the water. You've got 100 boats, 1,000 people in the water, and 100 and something whale sharks. It's a recipe for disaster. Whale sharks are getting injured, and I'm just waiting for a person to get hurt out there because somebody's going to back a boat down on somebody and it's going to be bad. So we need to really get our arms around this conservation problem. We call this ecotourism. Is it really ecotourism when you're running over the animals that you're trying to protect? Probably not. So we really need to do a little bit more work to improve conservation efforts at this location and at lots of other locations. I'm not picking on Mexico. Here's a photograph that was taken in the Philippines, now infamous photo of a girl standing on top of a whale shark and smiling in the town of Oslob in Cebu province. And this photo got them in a lot of trouble. And what it reflects is a different cultural attitude to whale sharks because they're sharks and not whales. If this was a marine mammal, the attitude would be different. But there's still a prevalent attitude in lots of countries that sharks and fish in general are really lower animals and then don't deserve our respect and protection. And I think you would have to agree that that that's not the case and really don't want to be encouraging stuff like this. The worst expression of all, of course, is fishing. Whale sharks are fished. This is a truly gargantuan whale shark that was caught in Pakistan. You run into a lot of things. It's illegal to fish whale sharks pretty much anywhere, and it's a CITES appendix listed species, which means you can't transport them across international borders either. So catching them here to eat them somewhere else is not really an option. But there's plenty of times when you read news stories about fisherman X who got a whale shark tangled in their nets, and instead of releasing the animal at sea, they dragged it back to port and sold it for a significant profit. In this case, it was hard for the authorities to ignore the size of the animal that was being reported. This was supposedly an accidental entanglement in fishing gear. And in this case, the government was not able to ignore that. They came in and confiscated the animal. It's now on display in a museum in Karachi. For some reason, Pakistan has massive whale sharks. I'm not exactly sure why. But fishing, illegal and otherwise, is something we want to avoid. One of the things that is really a bad practice that has been outlawed is the process of purse seiners setting their nets around whale sharks. Why would they do that? Well, because whale sharks and tunas have this special relationship. You want to catch a bunch of tuna? Set a net around a whale shark. Chances are there's tuna below it, behind it, in front of it, or next to it. And so by doing that, you're able to catch lots of tuna. You're going to catch the whale shark as well, and ultimately it's not very good for them. So we've had some success recently in getting that practice outlawed throughout the Pacific, and hopefully, step by step, we can improve conservation measures for whale sharks wherever they occur. One of the things that a lot of people ask me about is the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. What did that do to whale sharks in the Gulf of Mexico? Great question. We don't really know, except that I can show you this map where there are sightings in red dots, which are all of the whale shark sightings in the northern Gulf of Mexico, and the brown smudge, which is the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And you can see that it's the same place. So we were very worried about this. Thankfully, the following summer, just as many whale sharks showed up in Mexico as always, and just as many whale sharks are showing up in the northern Gulf of Mexico as always. So what I tell myself to help me sleep at night is that whale sharks have excellent sense of smell, and they probably detected that there was something wrong with the water in this area, and they just went somewhere else. It makes a lot of sense. They're very good at smelling. I hope they did that, because if you think about that way of feeding that we talked about earlier, if there was ever an animal designed to suck oil off the surface of the ocean, it would be a whale shark. It would look a lot like a whale shark, in fact. So we were very worried about that happening, and it looks like it didn't happen, which is great. Whale sharks are listed as vulnerable. I just put that up there to show you that the international community does look at where they are. They're also listed as data deficient. We don't know how many whale sharks there are, so we can't actually say with much confidence where on that scale from not evaluated to extinct where they should be. So right now they're listed as vulnerable. They're not the only shark that is endangered. Some sharks are critically endangered, like the sawfish that's on the left, and the angel shark that's up the top, and even this great hammerhead down here. All of these species of sharks are endangered, and in two cases here, critically endangered, which means they are in imminent risk of going extinct. And I don't know about you guys, but I think an ocean that has these species in it is infinitely more interesting than an ocean that doesn't have these species in it. So even though they're not fuzzy mammals, I think they deserve our attention, they deserve our protection, and so that's why I work and others work towards doing exactly that. How do we do it in Mexico? We set up a small NGO to cover our conservation and research efforts. It's called Choc Achawil. I think I said that right. It's not Klingon, it's Mayan, and it means blue realm, and that's the name that we've given to our NGO that's supposed to help us be an umbrella organization for our conservation efforts in Mexico. At the end of the day, what it's all about, whether we're talking about the whale sharks in the aquarium or the whale sharks in Mexico, I like to talk about this moment because in this picture, what we've got is two young men at Georgia Aquarium that are coming face to face with the world's largest fish. The kid on the left's mouth is wide open, the kid on the right is reaching out to touch the whale shark. And I really like this moment because if you're doing it like this, the technology and the engineering and the science melts away. You can't even see the 2-foot-thick acrylic paint. You can't see any of the engineering that's keeping the water clean, and you can't see all the work that we had to do in order to put a whale shark in front of these kids. What you see is two kids having their minds blown by the world's largest fish. And this is a fantastic moment because while this is happening, these two kids are receptive to whatever educational, scientific, or conservation messaging we want to give them. we want to tell them about how to care for the oceans, this is the time to do it. You want to tell them about amazing animals that are out there waiting to be discovered, this is the time to do it. And so this, to me, encapsulates everything about what Georgia Aquarium is about, what public aquariums in general are about, not just us, every aquarium, and what the act of marine science and STEM in the marine field is all about. And with that, I'm going to stop, and I want to thank you all for your attention tonight, and thanks for having me here in McAllen. Thank you.